Your Excellency Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbuli, Honorable Martin Griffiths, United Nations Under-Secretary for Humanitarian Affairs, Honorable Jan Egeland, Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council, the esteemed Dr. El-Shafi Khidir Sayed, Chairperson of FICRA for Studies and Development, and head of the Conference Organizing Committee, distinguished participants, friends, and colleagues. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Said and FICRA for Studies and Development for taking the initiative to organize this important conference to address what is indeed a very pressing matter, the humanitarian crisis in Sudan. I also thank His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and the esteemed government of the Arab Republic of Egypt for agreeing to and hosting the conference. I also extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Said and FICRA for Studies and Development for inviting me to attend this important conference and to make a few remarks as the conference concludes its work. I apologize that I could not attend the conference, but I would like to assure you that I've been with you in spirit, fully cognizant of the absolute importance of the matters on the agenda of the conference. I therefore also extend my sincere appreciation to all the delegates and participants, grateful that you came together to answer the urgent question with regard to the Sudanese humanitarian crisis: what is to be done? Sudan is no stranger to humanitarian crisis. Indeed, its recent history has been punctuated by episodes of drought, of famine, war-induced starvation. But never before have we witnessed a crisis at this scale. The African and international response to this disaster has been woefully inadequate. However, as all of us know, the African Union and the United Nations have a history of engagement in humanitarian crises in Sudan and in seeking to end violence against civilians. As long ago as 1989, the United Nations set up its first ever humanitarian operation that crossed the front line of an active war to bring aid to civilians. That was the Operation Lifeline Sudan. Almost 20 years ago, in February 2004, the African Union Peace and Security Council was preoccupied with the crisis in Darfur as one of the most important matters on its agenda. And ultimately, over the following 17 years, thousands of African peacekeepers served with AMIS and its successor, the United Nations African Mission in Darfur, UNAMID, among others, to ensure the prevalence of conditions to meet the humanitarian needs of the population in Darfur. More than 270 peacekeepers lost their lives while serving in these missions. And we owe it to those men and women to seek peace and the protection of civilians in Darfur today. Let me express my particular sorrow for the victims of the recent massacre in Adamata in Western Darfur State, as well as others before, especially the Masalit. The escalating violence against civilians in Darfur is appalling, and I appeal to those responsible, especially the commanders of the Rapid Support Forces and the associated militia, to halt this criminal behavior at once. In Darfur, large numbers of people are seeking safety in the city of El Fasher, which is the sole remaining major city not controlled by the Rapid Support Forces. And when the RSF took over the cities of Al Janina, Zalijeh, and Nyala, on each occasion the residents were subjected to massacres, to pillage, and to rape. We cannot allow this to happen to El Fasher. We should consider every possible measure to ensure the protection of civilians in that city. My remarks concerning our sincere condolences for those who have lost their lives in Darfur and our demand to all the belligerents to end their crimes against the people also extends to others throughout Sudan, including Khartoum and Kordofan. In this context, I must extend our condolences and sympathies with the more than 45 staff members of registered national and international humanitarian organizations, who are mainly Sudanese nationals, who have lost their lives over recent months while doing selfless work to relieve the suffering of the millions. Again, as we all know, those 45 are but the tip of an iceberg, made up of a large number of volunteers, including healthcare workers, members of neighborhood committees, customary leaders, and selfless individuals who responded to the challenge of the need of their communities for essential supplies and protection in their hour of need, and who paid the ultimate price for their compassion and courage. The question remains what is to be done, especially immediately, to address the humanitarian needs of millions of people in Sudan. I am certain you have looked at the latest report of the UN Secretary General on Sudan, published only a week ago on the 13th of November, and I apologize for quoting this report since you are familiar with it. However, it is important once more to spell out the scale of the problem confronting the people of Sudan, as well as the international community. In his report, the United Nations Secretary General says, and I quote, "The conflict in Sudan, in particular in Khartoum, in Darfur, and Kordofan, has exacerbated an already dire humanitarian situations. Millions lack access to essential goods and services such as food, water, shelter, electricity, education, healthcare, and nutrition. More than 18 million people lack access to sanitation, and approximately 3.5 million children under 5 are acutely malnourished. This underscores the urgent need for a multi-sectoral humanitarian response, as half of the population of Sudan, that is 24.7 million people, require humanitarian assistance." And he says, the Secretary General, since the conflict began, Sudan has witnessed one of the fastest growing displacement crises in the world, with 4.85 million people displaced to more than 5,034 locations throughout the 18 states in Sudan. Approximately 1.7 million people have crossed into neighboring countries, including Central African Republic, Chad, Egypt, Ethiopia, South Sudan. And within Sudan itself, an estimated 191,300 refugees have fled areas of active conflict to other areas. Humanitarian access remains severely limited, especially in Khartoum, in Darfur, and Kordofan, where humanitarian needs are considered to be the highest. And it says that more than 70% of the 6.3 million people who are close to famine are in areas where access is extremely limited, owing to active fighting and insecurity. Inadequate funding remains a major challenge. The revised 2023 Sudan Humanitarian Response Plan requires $2.57 billion to provide life-saving multi-sectoral assistance to more than 18 million people in desperate need up to the end of the year 2023, this year. And according to the Financial Tracking Service of the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, the appeal is only 33.6% funded. That is at the end of October. But despite these immense challenges, says the Secretary General, by the end of September, a total of 156 humanitarian partners had provided humanitarian assistance throughout Sudan, reaching more than 4.1 million people. Unquote. I'd like to believe that we should use these objective observations by the UN Secretary General as our common template from which to proceed as we strive to answer the question, what is to be done urgently to respond to the Sudan humanitarian crisis? In this regard, I believe that it is imperative that the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Assistance, OCHA, should immediately act to implement the decision arrived at in Jeddah, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and announced earlier this month, on November 7, according to which the Sudan Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces committed to take steps to facilitate increased humanitarian assistance and to implement confidence-building measures. Among others, OCHA will have to ensure that the Sudanese civil society organizations involved in humanitarian assistance are involved in the processes led by OCHA. Similarly, of course, OCHA must also ensure that the necessary support reaches the large numbers of Sudanese refugees in the neighboring countries. I also believe that IGAD, now a co-convener of the Jeddah process, should also be party to the implementation of the Jeddah Agreement, maintaining direct contact with the Sudan Armed Forces, the Rapid Support Forces, the civil society organizations, and others involved in the humanitarian access work in Sudan. IGAD should also interact with the UN to help attend to the urgent matter of further international mobilization of the required resources as indicated in the 2023 Sudan Humanitarian Response Plan. The November 7th statement from the Jeddah process says that the co-facilitators regret that the parties were unable to agree on ceasefire implementation arrangements during this first round of talks. And they said, we call upon SAF and the RSF to put the Sudanese people first, silence the guns, and seek a negotiated end to this needless war. I am certain that this important conference fully agrees with this appeal of the co-facilitators of the Jeddah process. I would suggest in this context that while attending to the matter of humanitarian access, IGAD should also take up with SAF and the RSF and the civilian formations the challenge to put the Sudanese people first, to silence the guns, and seek a negotiated end to what is a needless war. As it engages those role players, IGAD would maintain regular contact with its Jeddah process co-facilitators, as well as with Egypt and the collective of Sudan's neighboring states. I would like to believe that our important conference has indeed considered these matters, and in that context, I'm happy to add my own voice to what I'm certain will be a rich harvest of suggestions decisively to move forward on the matter of addressing Sudan's humanitarian crisis. I too join the conference in its unanimous demand that the armed belligerents in Sudan must indeed put the Sudanese people first, silence the guns, and seek a negotiated end to this needless war. Thank you for the important work that you have done, delegates to the conference, and thank you very much for your attention.